My name is Jane Camp. I'm a professor of art over at Heartland Community College. I'm from the Midwest, graduated from high school in Peoria, but have lived around the Midwest for most of my life. I was in grad school from '89 to '94, and I had Harold Greger for my chair for my MFA. So, it was quite the experience. I chose him, and he was awesome, tough, interesting, direct, and really shaped my work and really influenced me that way, but it also really influenced me as a teacher. So I was just talking to my husband about this, and this is why I selected him for my MFA chair. I remember him going around and looking at everybody's work, and he was extremely direct about what was working and what wasn't working, and he was very articulate about that. He had such a breadth of art historical knowledge at his fingertips at all times that his feedback was so credible. He didn't just say what he thought about your work, but he said why he thought it. And I'll never forget this person who had painted the American flag in their piece. And this is what I was just telling my husband. And he just didn't understand the iconic nature of when you put a flag in there and what that might mean in your work. And, it really evolved into a very interesting critique and discussion about putting that kind of subject matter in your work. For me particularly, I was really interested in trying to work abstractly. And, even though he was a landscape artist, he had such an integral part in color theory, and all the color theory that he imparted on me, Helen Frankenthaler, all of that it really elevated my art. He also made a suggestion for my MFA internship that I never knew about, and he suggested that you can go into any of the national art galleries and make a request to see work that maybe wasn't being exhibited, because at the time in the 90s you couldn't see the color field abstractionists. It wasn't popular at that point. So I took it upon myself, with Harold Greger's guidance, to go to the National Gallery of Art and ask to see Helen Frankenthaler's work. And they took me in the back because we own it. I would have never known that we own that work and that you can make those kinds of appointments. So he really helped me think outside the box. And for sure, every critique, every lecture, all my experiences with him were just astounding in that way. I didn't get that in undergrad. That wasn't my undergrad experience at all. And so while tough, I appreciated that. And it affects, I've taken that on to my own teaching. It might not make you popular, but it's truthful. There's a kind way to deliver, to talk about art, that you're seeing. And you talk about what works, but why? And then you have to talk about what's not working and why. And I think that's a direct result of Greger, more than anybody that I studied under. That's the biggest thing that still influences me to this day, that I'm grateful for, that I enjoyed. Yes, I took watercolor. The watercolorist, he helped me get into a national watercolor show. He was a juror for that. And, he wasn't the type of person to let somebody get into a show that didn't deserve it. But, it was certainly influential for me to get down to Springfield, Missouri, and to be in a show like that. It was astounding, and it was completely, non-representational work. It was very outside the parameters of what most watercolor shows are. And, he wanted to expand that field as well. So, the way that he handled color and to make color travel, I never had that. Even though I was a painter in undergrad, I never had those kinds of discussions in undergrad. Again, really super grateful. people looked at me, well, you've chosen him as the chair of your, your MFA committee. Why would you do such a thing? And, you know, this Midwestern naive, I was much quieter at that time in my life and kind of sheltered person. I just wanted to jump into the deep end, you know, and, you know, I really wanted that whole experience. I mean, after all, you know, all of us who were in the MFA at the time, we were paying for it, and, you know, it's such really a luxury now that I think about it, that I gave myself both to get an MS and an MFA and study for that long. What a gift that I gave myself. But, you know, I lived on dumpster furniture to do it. You know, I put all my money into painting. I bought, you know, even just understanding what are the better supplies. I didn't even understand that from after getting a BFA, which I think I should have, by the way. So, you know, again, I think I bring that back to my students. I really talk about that because you work against yourself without enough pigment in your paint. You're constantly working against yourself. And you know, he was very generous about bringing a whole bunch of paint in and sharing it with his classes because, you know, we're all living on ramen noodles, or, you know, mine was Bisquick, making pancakes, you know, to fill yourself up enough so that you could keep working. So, well, obviously you were in my cohort, Doug. Lloyd Wassenaar, it was in mine, who, you know, came to influence me maybe a little bit after grad school too. Michelle Peterson, for sure, I really connected with her, probably the most. And, you know, it was great discussions between all of us. I think I was the primary one still that chose Harold. I don't think either one of them went to that extent. So, you know, again, I had art history courses with Harold Greger. And, you know, he was as good in that as he was in teaching the studio arts. I mean, really influential. And remember when you had the blue books and you had to old school write out the answers and just trying to give everything that you know. And he was so detail specific about so much art history. You know, it was an experience. He brought that in every class. That's one of the things I actually do in my classes too, is I always make sure that I reference for different assignments or whatever, some are historical figure, actually where I get the idea of for an assignment, because he would really bring art history into the studio. He made it more relevant. So it wasn't just studying old school slides in a slide case before the internet, but really about how this might relate to what you're doing. And again, about that performance art. I had totally forgotten about that, but yeah, and performance art was something in undergrad that I read about, but I totally didn't get it at all. I totally didn't get it until he really made it relevant. He, you know, and talked about it in context, I think, to the time that it was being created, and how, you know, it challenged, you know, it's the process, it's the focus on process. I'm like, what? Why didn't somebody explain this to me sooner? It's not like I couldn't understand it, but I didn't understand. You know, and writing out that art isn't just about the object. It is about, you know, the idea. It's about the creator. It's about the action of it. You know, so that it had a larger breadth to art making. Yeah. But, you know, when he talked about, well, part of the art making process is the physicality of what you do. And that's starting to be interjected in here through the focus is now on the physicality. I'm like, wow, that makes total sense now. I totally get it because it relates back to me and what I was doing. It made art history then more relevant, not just something of this period or that period or whatever, you know. Just context, how important context is to anything that you do. And he was great at pointing that out, you know. So again, totally, as much as my artwork, he's influenced me as a professor for sure. You know, when I got my MS, I wanted to focus on making art. I really wanted to be a better artist. But because I got a teaching assistantship and I saw him teach, I was inspired. I really went on for my MFA because I knew I wanted to teach, or at least try to, to the best of my ability. Oh, the first teaching. You know, for sure I emulated. You know, it's, yeah, simple. I emulated my instructors for sure. And then, you know, you have to change with the times and your students, who they are, you know, and address that. And I think the students today are very different than what you and I were in the 80s and 90s, for sure, and that's part of change. But yeah, art history, never more personal, for sure. I do have one favorite memory. Okay, he was so intimidating to me, but I chose him. So we went up, there was, you know, this is when you could do the bus trips up to Chicago, and I forget what particular gallery we were going to see. So, you know, he went with, and we were walking around. I think we did the whole gallery district, but there was one kind of a peculiar gallery that was a theater space too or something. It's more of a collaborative or whatever. And he was walking around, and, you know, it was sometimes hard for me to talk to him because I knew how much I didn't know. Unlike students today who think they know, I knew how much I didn't know. And I saw him trip just a little bit. He didn't fall completely, but it was really liberating to know, oh, he's human. he's human. I wanted that, just, you know, that maybe this is a little bit attainable for me, I guess, you know, moment when I saw him do that. And, you know, it kind of give me a relief. Maybe because maybe that's why I felt like I could ask him to be my chair, you know, that 9 revisions though on my 9 revisions. And I'm like, what do you want? I'm not, you know, I'm a B writer on a good day. I'm a B writer. I'm like, that's it. And, you know, but it's the best paper I ever wrote, you know, there you go. You know, and I'm so grateful for all of them, actually. You know, when I'm looking at Harold Boyd's work and Ken Holder and Harold Greger, I feel really fortunate that I came in such a great time. Ray George, you know, I had printmaking, I took intaglio. I liked intaglio because you didn't have to move the big stones. That was at least more manageable, you know, on that end. You know, more like drawing, and yeah. So I feel really, really grateful. You know, I hope that I bring that to my students as well. I really hope that, you know, that I'm so interested in art. You know, I love it. I love dialogue about it. I love smart, intellectual, thoughtful dialogue, and that is all because I think of Greger and Ken and Boyd, and my experience really, I think with my MFA